What is up, guys? This is Brad with Spite Fitness, and I am on the go. Currently hanging out in Fort Worth, Texas, at the airport, kind of waiting for a storm to pass by so I can get on with my next flight. At any rate, it seemed like a good opportunity to sit down and do a little bit of a Q&A. So that's kind of the plan here, is to sit and do this Q&A, get some questions answered that have come in, and I've been kind of sitting on them for a little while, so I apologize about that. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and start looking at some of the questions. Previously, Greg McCandles was asking me what got me into powerlifting, and so that goes back to, childhood essentially. My dad was a powerlifter before I was ever even born, and did pretty good for himself. So in my basement when I grew up, I had basically a full gym, bench press, squat, everything, and a whole bunch of weight. And my dad had all these powerlifting trophies kind of all over on the shelves downstairs, and so just kind of seeing that always stuck with me. I played soccer most of my life and got into high school, varsity, and I was upset with how political it was. It was all about kind of who you were friends with or being good with a coach, about how much playtime you got. And I got really tired of relying on other people for my success. So after senior year of high school, I stopped playing soccer and almost began exclusively powerlifting, and that's essentially how I got into it. All right, next question. So Dozer Dimmick 90 asks, when preparing for an APFT, do I change up my training and focus on the APFT? So yeah, absolutely. If I'm getting geared up to try to do the Army physical fitness test, the training definitely changes. Really, the biggest change is a lot more running, and that's usually it. So in terms of like the physical strength, that's not much of a problem. Push-ups aren't much of a problem. Sit-ups are a little weird for me, just because if I put my arms up like that over my head to do the sit-ups, that's a lot of weight kind of on the top half of me. So I'm not as fond of sit-ups maybe as some other people are. But really the biggest thing is just making sure that I get in the run, and then what has been a challenge over the last few years is just making sure that I pass the tape test. So by having my neck as thick as it is, it compensates for my weight and allows me to kind of stay under the threshold of the body fat. So by having a thick neck, I'm able to be a little bit heavier. I expect here in the next little while I'll be dropping some weight and bringing things down. I won't be able to focus quite so exclusively on powerlifting probably for a while, but it'll be an interesting change, an interesting challenge, and so I'm kind of curious to see how next little while in my life is going to be. So yeah, absolutely, definitely pivot when we get ready for the APFT. All right, next question. I believe Adam asked what my warm-up protocol was before comp lifts, during a meet, and then any other tips or tricks. So in terms of like my warm-up protocol for a meet, I basically, it goes in order: squat, bench, deadlift. I try to just stay warm, and so typically to a meet I'll wear kind of hoodie and sweatpants and start warming up, and so I can get a little bit of a kind of a patina of sweat going. And then with warming up for the events, you want to make sure that you are sufficiently warm, so you do enough to be ready, but you don't want to do so much where you're actually you're taking away from potential strength. So it's kind of a delicate balance. I tend to make plate jumps when I'm warming up, so I'll basically 20 kilo up or 25 kilo up, and just doing the first plate or two, I'll do some reps, and then basically after that it'll all just singles, to try to feel the weight and to get myself kind of prepared. And I don't like to make too big a jump, because I like to be able to kind of feel that gradual increase in weight, so that I'm ready to take whatever my attempt is. And then usually my last warm-up is probably right about when my flight is starting. As one of the bigger, heavier lifters, I'm usually one of the last lifters. at least in most meets that I've been at. And so I generally hit my last warm-up squat or warm-up attempt kind of right as the beginning of my flight is going, or like right at the very tail end of the flight before me. We could talk meat stuff all day, so that might be a separate video, but I hope that answers your question, Adam. Next couple of questions come from Shirag Somaraj, and so I'm going to try to get through this as best as I can. There is a little bit of a language barrier. First question is, should you stick to whatever percentage that you're on, even if you can do more? And I would say yes. Whenever you're programming or you're following a program, you're going to be on kind of it should be a range. It's very difficult to be able to pinpoint exactly a percentage, because it's hard to actually ascertain what your true 1 rep max is sometimes. Because maybe it was actually 5 pounds more and you just didn't try it, so on and so forth. And then also, like, what you're capable on a daily basis of will change as well. So you have to be able to kind of flex and move around with kind of what's going on. So your percentage should be a bit of a range, say within 2 to 3%. So, you could hit 70% or you could hit, 73%, for example. And I think that you should generally stick to the program when you can. There are times where deviating from the program may be beneficial, but by and large, what's the point of having a program if you're not going to follow the program? So I'm generally a big fan, I'm a big proponent of kind of sticking with a game plan. He also asked about peaking, and in terms of exercise and it being only for powerlifting. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, you can peak for just about anything. Any event, particularly with strength, you can peak for. Now, I think that, and this is just my opinion, but I think that Olympic lifting is a little bit different. While yes, you can peak for it, I think that the biggest limiting factor for people's ability to continue to progress with Olympic lifting has less to do with strength and more to do with technical abilities. I think very much that there is a point where athletes get to where it's not necessarily the strength that is limiting them. It's those technical abilities to be able to perform some of those only movements that is really the limiting factor. At least that's what I've heard people say. I don't know much about it because I've never really done any Oli lifting, so I can't really speak to that. But suffice to say that you can peak for just about anything, and I think that some of the same principles that are in the Juggernaut program apply broadly to pretty much anything that you want to apply it to. So hypertrophy is not just for powerlifting. And then last question from Shirag. I'm going to say Shirag. Last question. He asks if reverse bench press and reverse grip strict press worth doing. I don't do them. I probably would never do them. I don't think that reverse grip strict press would be a great thing to do. It just seems like it would be very, very awkward and hard on the wrists. But I have heard of some people doing reverse grip bench press and feeling some alleviation of shoulder issues when they do a reverse grip bench press. And for quite a while, I think that the bench press record was held by someone who actually did reverse grip press. So that I would say that the reverse grip bench press is way more useful, and you'd be more likely to do it than the strict press. All right, and then another question is about kind of looking at the Juggernaut system. That's Chad Wesley Smith and those guys, trying to figure out rep range and total number of sets during hypertrophy. So I think the sets should be within a range, probably something in the ballpark of no less than 8 and probably no more than 12, maybe 15. The thing with that is if you get too many reps in, you get to a point of diminishing returns with each rep. So like a marathon runner, for example, what is the effect of one more step? It's not as, you're not getting as much adaptation from one more step with a marathon runner as you would for, lower weight, like say a 3 rep. So in case if you're talking about a 3 rep max, one more rep represents quite a lot of stress onto the system. So I think that going too high in rep range is probably not going to be useful. I would say probably at the absolute most 15 reps, and then at the least 8 reps, specifically talking about the hypertrophy phase. Now as far as sets go, that is going to be individual based, so it's more what you can handle. So for example, someone who is very highly trained and can sustain a lot of work may be able to tolerate more sets, whereas someone who's got some kind of an issue, malnourished, or not having good sleep, or maybe somebody that is relatively detrained or untrained, they may not be able to sustain that many sets because they don't have those physical adaptations to be able to cope with that amount of stress. So if you, as a untrained athlete, were to do, say, 5-6 sets, you may put yourself into too much work and kind of overdo it, and get into that kind of potentially overtraining, potentially. Whereas someone who is a little bit more trained and is accustomed and acclimated to that level of stress, 6 reps or 6 sets rather may not seem like that big of a deal. So it really is individually based, but I would stick with, if you're talking hypertrophy, again, I would stick with the 3-set to 5-set range, and that should serve you pretty well. I think these are the last questions here, and this is from Kunal. So Kunal hit me up, had some questions. He's actually got 6 questions, and we're going to try to get through these pretty quick here. So he says, thoughts on belt and straps as a beginner. I'm for it. Now, I would want to make sure that if I was training somebody or working with somebody, that they had the proficiency to perform the movements correctly. But I think that a belt is a good thing because you get a little bit extra stability, and then also you get better muscle activation with a belt on than without. Just because it gives your mind that kinesthetic cue, something actually physically touching you, to give you that cue to brace harder. So there have been some studies that revealed that you get more core, more muscle activation with a belt than without. So I'm very pro belt. And then as far as straps, I'm assuming maybe you're talking about deadlift, and I am a big fan of straps as well, provided that you're proficient at the movement. Now for me, straps are important because the deadlift muscles, mainly the erector spinae, the glutes and hamstrings, those are fairly big, fairly powerful muscles. Whereas the muscles in your forearm are not necessarily all that big and powerful, unless you're Popeye. But I don't want to limit a bigger, stronger muscle for the weaknesses of a weaker one. Now, if you have grip issues, you should definitely work to shore up those issues and address the grip issues. But when trying to maximize my deadlift training, for example, I don't blink an eye at throwing some straps on and getting after it. So, yeah, I'm pro both. How to stay focused and motivated while others don't believe in you? Well, honestly, that's kind of a personal thing. The thing that I would say is very important here, Kunal, is find small goals and achieve them. And so if you're having issues or difficulty, following through, or being dedicated to what it is you're doing, second guessing yourself, or just being down on yourself because other people are whatever, or doing it too, I would say find small goals and achieve those small goals. And slowly, if you're achieving these goals, you are going to feel better. And then potentially, if these people are close to you and they are, they can see what you're doing, or they have some awareness of you, then they'll probably see that you're achieving these goals as well. And it's hard to be kind of a naysayer when you see somebody knocking down goals. So that'd be my recommendation for that. Third is he wants to know 3 best exercises for improving squat, bench, and deadlift, and the press. Well, bud, I'm going to tell you honestly, it's my wholehearted belief that the best way to increase each of those movements is to perform that movement. If you want to get some additional work in then you might perform a variation of that movement that changes things up a little bit. Maybe changes the center of gravity, maybe changes, you know, position, or just slightly the mechanics. But by and large, the best way to get better at squatting is to squat. There's really no way. There's no way around it. There are some great accessory works that are accessory exercises that we could talk more about at another point in time. Thoughts on isolation exercises for strength gain. Now, this kind of goes back to the last one. I think if you're talking just total body strength, then isolation exercises probably aren't the way to go, because you're going to get the most yield and most return on your strength, strength results and investment of time by doing the big compound movements: squat, bench, deadlift, and then press. Right? So those are not isolation movements, and I think that those will have the biggest impact on strength gains. Now, when you're saying like isolation exercises, in my mind, I'm thinking like a preacher curl, right? So an isolation exercise might have a place in your program to work a specific muscle. So if you were, say, isolating the triceps, that would be time well spent, because the triceps are a big mover in the bench, for example. If you were going to isolate some hamstring work, I think that might serve you well as well, because that isolated posterior exercise would definitely help out with, say, deadlift, for example. So it kind of depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking bicep curls, probably not. If you're talking, exercising one of the big muscle groups involved in one of the compound movements, yeah, sure. All right. What are some exercises you recommend for strong and rigid core? Again, I'm going right back to squatting and deadlifting. One of the best things that you can do for core development is put heavy load on your core and stabilize, which is what you do with a squat and with a deadlift, particularly with a squat. So learn how to brace that core real well, and that will give you pretty much all the core exercise you need. I don't do any planks or sit-ups or any other exercises for my core other than the main movements, and I don't really have too many issues. All right, so then the last one is how to stay injury-free while continuing to lift heavy. Well, that's kind of the rub, right? Is at some point in time you're going to get hurt. It's kind of an inevitability. So it's going to happen. The thing is staying positive when it does happen, and then staying active when it happens, and trying to find ways to work around the injury that you have. And I've also done videos on that, just kind of talking generally about that. But regardless, when you get hurt, almost certainly there is something you can do, whether it's some adaptation of the exercise, lowered weight, lowered range of motion, or all three. But yeah, it's my wholehearted belief you're probably not going to get out of this thing unscathed if you're lifting heavy for an extended period of time. All right, I think that is it. I'm flipping through real fast to see if there's any more. Yep, that's it, guys. I appreciate all the questions that came through. I'm sorry that I sat on them for a while. Some of these I was kind of hoping I could address with Coach John, and in some instances we did. I do have some stuff filmed with him, but some of these ones too are just better suited for me. And then I just needed to sit down and do the A to the Q. So now we've got this Q&A put together, and hopefully something in there was helpful for you guys. If you got any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them in the chat box below. I'll be sure to respond. I appreciate you guys checking this out. Remember to like, share, and please subscribe. I definitely appreciate you guys helping me grow the channel, and you do that by asking your questions, and you do that by also being here and kind of being a participant with what's going on with the channel. So I just want to say thank you, guys. All right, that's it, guys. Remember, no matter what it is you think you can't do, train despite. You're either going to find an excuse or you're going to find a way. And I hope you find that way, guys. Thanks for checking it out, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.